William Collier Jr. was a big star at the end of the silent era and made quite a successful transition to the talkies. But by 1935, he was retired from acting. Why? Join me as I investigate. William was born in 1902 in New York City as Charles F. Gall Jr. to Charles F. Gall, a theater manager, and Paula Marr, an actress who began to appear on Broadway in 1905. From an early age, young Charles was called by his nickname Buster. While it is not clear exactly when, we know that Paula and Charles Sr. divorced between 1905 and 1908. I suspect it was before 1908 because that year, at the age of 6, young Buster made his Broadway debut in The Patriot, in which he appeared on the stage with his mother and was credited under the name Buster Marr. The Patriot was written by and starred famous actor William Collier, who had been starring on Broadway since 1894. In 1910, Paula married William Collier, and he adopted her son, giving him the new name William Collier Jr., aka Buster Collier. Buster joined his mother and stepfather on the road in several productions, including a touring version of The Patriot, in which he got to reprise his Broadway debut role. By 1916, William Sr. had been signed by Thomas Ince's Triangle Films, who also signed his young stepson. That same year, at the age of 14, Buster appeared in his first film, starring in The Bugle Call, in which he portrayed the young hero, Billy, who rescues his stepmother from an attack on a Western Army post. According to an article in Variety, Buster's film opened the same day as his stepfather's film, The No Good Guy, thus putting father and son in competition at the box office. Variety also gave Buster a great review for his screen debut. Even though The Bugle Call appears to have done well, Buster did not make another film for another 4 years. In 1920, at the age of 18, Buster first supported his stepfather in a role in The Servant Question before appearing in a major supporting role in The Soul of Youth. This film, which was about a rebellious orphan played by Louis Sargent, saw Buster as Dick Armstrong, sweetheart to Lila Lee's character, who saves the day in the end. While the role wasn't that large, it got Buster good notices. Later that year, he was leading man to Olive Thomas in her final film, Everybody's Sweetheart, which also got him good notices. 1921 saw him play similar roles as he did in Everybody's Sweetheart. He was leading man to Fair Benny in The Girl from Porcupine and to Billy Dove in At the Stage Door. 1922 saw him in his first big starring role since The Bugle Call, Cardigan, in which he played the title role, a young man that joins the Minutemen in the American Revolution. The film got Buster considerable press even 2 years before its release and got Buster great reviews from Motion Picture News, but mixed reviews from Variety. In 1923, Buster co-starred with Lionel Barrymore and Alma Rubens in Enemies of Women. In this film, he played Gaston, a young soldier and son to Alma's Duchess, whose lover, the prince, played by Lionel, mistakes as her young paramour. The film was a hit and got Buster a Photoplay Award for Best Performance of the Month. Over the next 4 years, Buster starred in many films, in both leading and supporting roles. In 1924's The Lighthouse by the Sea, he was the owner of dog hero Rin Tin Tin. Most of his other leading roles were the quote-unquote leading man to such lovely stars as Billy Rhodes, Mary Philbin, Pauline Stark, Betty Compson, and Greta Nissen, with whom he starred in the surviving The Lucky Lady from 1926. He also made a number of memorable supporting appearances, often playing the friend or sidekick of the leading man, such as his work with Milton Sills in The Seahawk in 1924, and his work with William Haynes, Ben Lyon, and Eleanor Boardman in Wine of Youth, also from 1924, which saw Buster and Pauline Guerin as the comic relief supporting couple. 1927 saw Buster come into his stardom even more. He took top billing in Backstage that year. In 1928, he starred in So This Is Love as a meek man that must rise to the occasion to defeat the no-good Boxster that is after his sweetheart, played by Shirley Mason. He also, that year, starred with Audrey Ferris in Beware of Bachelors. In 1929, Buster made his talkie debut in the part talkie One Stolen Night opposite Betty Bronson at Paramount, which was a commercial hit. Later that year, he starred in The Bachelor Girl with Jacqueline Logan. Two Men and a Maid with Alma Bennett, and The Donovan Affair with Agnes Ayres. All of these films got him good press. Buster had made quite a successful transition to the talkies and entered the 1930s with a series of successes, many of which were at Columbia Pictures. First, he starred as a jazz musician in the 1930 drama The Melody Man. Next, he starred with Pauline Stark in A Royal Romance. Buster was even more successful in 1931, starring in a series of critical and commercial hits. He played remorseful mobster Tony Passa in the Edward G. Robinson classic Little Caesar, played the Kid in Cimarron, starring Richard Dix and Irene Dunne, which won the Best Picture Oscar that year. He also starred with Joe E. Brown and Margaret Livingston in Broad-Minded, with William Boyd and Dorothy Sebastian in The Big Gamble, and with Una Merkel in The Secret Witness. Perhaps his finest picture of 1931, and arguably one of the best roles of his career, saw him as the leading male character Sam Kaplan, who loves Rose, played by Sylvia Sidney, in Elmer Rice's screen adaptation of his Pulitzer Prize-winning play Street Scene. Variety said that Buster's performance was splendid. 1932 saw Buster continue to make several starring appearances, starting with Miriam Hopkins in Dancers in the Dark, and with Sally Blaine and Lena Basquette in The Phantom Express. He was also top billed in Exposed, The Fighting Gentleman, and Speed Demon. 1933 saw Buster slow down a bit with his career, starring in only 3 films that year. Forgotten, with June Clyde, The Girl from Georgia with Sari Maritza, and opposite Miriam Hopkins once again in the pre-code classic The Story of Temple Drake, which saw him expand his range by playing more of a lecherous character than his normal good guy hero. Buster made just 2 more films after 1933. He starred with Lola Lane in Public Stenographer in 1934 and supported Preston Foster in 1935's The People's Enemy. Following this film, Buster retired from acting, but not from the film industry. In 1937, he moved to England and began working as a producer at Warner Brothers Teddington Studios there. Later, in the 1940s, he produced for the Rank Organization in England. In the 1950s, Buster returned to America and worked as a TV producer, most notably for the sitcom Mr. and Mrs. North. One source indicated that he also worked often as an agent. In 1956, at the age of 54, Buster retired from the entertainment business for good. He appears to have lived the rest of his life in quiet retirement. In 1934, he married Marie Stevens and the couple had 1 child. Marie passed away in 1981 and Buster followed in 1987 at the age of 85. So we are left with the question, why did William Collier Jr.'s stardom lose momentum in the talkies? Well, it did and it didn't. He was still playing leading roles at major studios through 1933 and seems to have decided to make the decision to slow down all on his own, probably to concentrate on his new marriage. He may have also realized that in his 30s he was growing too old to play his usual niche character of the young hero and may have wanted to get out before gambling with what may come next. However, since he often played supporting parts throughout his career, I don't think he would have had any problem transitioning to being a character actor, so I think his loss of stardom was by his own choice to just retire. He wanted to move behind the camera anyways and become a producer, so he did. While many of his films are lost, thankfully many of them and many of his best performances survive, including most of his talkies. I suggest checking out Wine of Youth, So This Is Love, from his silent days, and Little Caesar, and especially Street Scene from his talkie days. William Buster Collier Jr. was a great talent that proved he was equally adept at comedy or drama in both silent and sound films. What a talent, what a legend. I also have to mention that Buster's name was briefly borrowed on an episode of The Golden Girls in the 2nd season. Blanche Devereaux claims to have had a fling with a local politician named Mr. William Buster Collier. I hope to find out someday why they used Buster's name, but since they said it so specifically, it could not have been a coincidence. Please like this video and subscribe or follow this account if you want to learn more about the history of silent film stars whose stardom lasted only briefly in the talkies. Up next, join me as I cover the silent talkie career of Nancy Carroll. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week.